Sorry?
Just left, right. On
Perfect. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ntukogu, that dude up there. I just want to first say thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to be able to be in a room with people who are ready and interested in hearing what you have to offer, right? As creatives, we sometimes walk into rooms, we offer our goods and we're told, that's not on point. So today's conversation is about transparency. It's something that I feel like I talk about a lot. I've got this thing that my friends call going full roam, right? Where it's like occasionally I'll be having a conversation with someone, I just go off on a tangent for like 45 minutes. They're like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm trying to learn you something, man. It's part of the process. And transparency is definitely one of those things we talk about. This is a traditional definition of what transparency means, but I feel like as a generation we've redefined it, or at least we see it differently. Because for me, from my perspective, I feel like transparency is what happens when there are no longer any gatekeepers to information. There are no longer any gatekeepers to access to what you need to become a, what's what I'm looking for here? See, I knew my mind was going to go blank. There are no longer any gatekeepers of what you would consider to the things that you need to take your goals and your ideas to fruition. And more importantly, there are no longer gatekeepers between us and the next person and the person across the ocean and the person 2 blocks over. Transparency changed all of that. So initially, access to information, I feel, started this process. As all of you know, I'm not going to go through the various ways in which we find the interwebs. But I really think that this was such a pivotal thing to create a generational shift that I believe it's probably the widest and the most interestingly diverse generational gap that's ever happened in the history of humanity. I mean, what our children's children will be waking up to is going to be so much different from what we knew that we can't even pretend to try to plot a course to their future. So I've always felt like having access to information and people consuming media and consuming information at such a voracious level that all that really created is sort of like a hunger for more information. At first, the internet was just all about finding stores, finding friends, finding whatever you needed, but not necessarily to figure out what the government is doing, not necessarily know what corporations are doing, not necessarily to get deep into what media is doing. And we wanted that. We hungered for that transparency. We wanted it to be clear. We wanted to make sure that everyone had access to the information they needed to be able to say, I am a fully informed human being. Now you transition that to the P2P level of transparency. Now we have access to information, but then we get to have access to each other. And that, I felt like, was such a huge shift for me. Because coming from Nigeria, I came to the States when I was 16 to go to UC. And when I first got here, I didn't know what the internet was. Like, I was shocked by what was going on. My first email address was like 4 numbers and like 3 letters. Like, it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. But a buddy of mine was like walking me through one of those, like, you guys remember the compact computers? That's real talk. I'm old. So he was like, you just type the thing, you send it to someone. I was like, send it to who? I don't know who else is on this thing. He was like, no, I got you. So like he introduced me to a few friends on Instant Messenger, and then we just started like communicating. And he introduced me to chat roulette, and that was such a beautiful but terrifying experience. And You know, it's like the first time I spoke to someone in Bulgaria, I was like, whoa. It was sort of like a mind-opening and mind-blowing experience because I was like, this random person at that, well, I think it was the middle of the night where they were, and the dude was shirtless, eating out of a bento box in Bulgaria, and I was like, oh, this is interesting, you know, and my buddy's like, talk to him. I'm like, I got this, man, no worries. And we struck up a conversation. We ended up having quite a bit in common, and we were friends through Instant Messenger and ICQ for years after that. We've lost touch since, but he was my introduction to what it feels like to be a globalized human through the power of the internet. So from things like ICQ and Instant Messenger, we delve into the sharing of ideas, the sharing of content. There was a time when you can only send code through chat rooms in order to share a concept that you had in mind, right? And then Napster comes along. You can send music. You can steal movies. You can send pictures. You can send whatever it is you wanted from a person to a person, regardless of where they were. The true breakdown of informational borders. The idea that your idea and your perspective and your personality can travel thousands upon thousands of miles in an instant. That sort of breakdown is something that I feel like our parents' could never imagine ever happening. And we grew up understanding it as a simple reality. So from that sort of transition, I felt like our access to each other and our ability to connect regardless of where we were started breaking down a few of the usual expected sociocultural borders, right? It turns out if you have internet access, you and I can talk about anything. You can tell me exactly what's going on in your town. You can tell me exactly what you think about what's happening 2,000 miles away. We can have a conversation as if we're both sitting in the same coffee shop discussing what the world is doing and how we feel about it. At that time, I was still growing into my, what I called disappointed / angry / probably pissed phase. And because like, you know, access to information is terrifying because like you start to realize how much of the world has been sort of used in the wrong way, how many systems are out there to keep people in a certain economic state, what it feels like to actually be able to get an aerial view of imperialism, what it feels like to be in a country that's been also changed by that imperialism and still experiencing it, right? And it was just like, it was just too much. It was just like an intense amount of information. And at first I was scared and worried. Second, I was excited and encouraged. And third, I was like, what am I gonna do with this? And so being able to chat with people over the internet about my thoughts and hear what they're going through. Like a friend of mine in Czechoslovakia was there in the middle of the Civil War, and he was still able to communicate with me, and he was telling me what was happening. And I was like, I feel you, man. I grew up in Nigeria under military government, and I've seen some terrible stuff as well. So now we're talking geopolitics as two 18-year-old kids, right? Like we know enough, but we felt strongly, you know? And it was able to give me comfort and was able to help me sort of like, you know, appreciate that no matter where you are in the world, everyone's experience sort of has a universality, right? And I don't need to wait for permission to express my opinion. I don't need to wait for someone to tell me it's okay to do this and be that. I no longer felt that the limitations that were ascribed to me had to stick, had to be my only definition. And I can only get there through experiences like this and through having access to technology like this. So you traverse the iMesh phase. Anyone here ever use iMesh? Oh, young folks, I'll tell you what. Well, it was terrible. So from the iMesh phase to things like social media and social engineering. I happen to think that Amazon really broke the mold. I feel like what they did in challenging an industry that we thought was unshakable, even then I knew that it was a genius idea. I was like, somehow these guys are gonna take over everything. And here we are, 20 years later, and they're trying to take over everything. I felt like that idea sparked the next idea, sparked another idea, which sparked another idea, which I feel as a generation, we are the first in a very long time that can create an industry out of thin air. And I think that's amazing. And I don't think that could have happened or that could exist if we were not able to have open sourcing of idea sharing, if we're not able to realize that the globalization of humanity is now. We no longer have to wait for it. You can find any information you need at the drop of a hat. Now, that was the fun part. This is the more interesting part. What access to information and transparency gives us in the long run is this: access to our own humanity, access to our power brokers, access to our governance. There was a time when if the government was doing something in back channels, you wouldn't know about it for 25, 30 years. Nowadays, it's within 2.5 weeks, or 24 hours, or it's immediate. And we can have our space to say and to make sure that our voices are heard. Now, not many people know what ALEC is. Does anyone here know what ALEC is? Dope, 2 people, 3. All right, so what ALEC is a group of corporate lawyers and just general legal counsel with corporations. So like, let's say AT&T wants to have a telecommunications bill passed. They contact ALEC, they tell them to write the bill, and then they hand said bill to their chosen congressperson. And that sort of corporatization of our political process is something that's not new. But the fact that we're all getting a chance to be a part of that process and be aware and sort of shine a light in those dark corners, I think it's a revolutionary thing for our generation. I'm pissed off about things like ALEC. I don't know about the rest of you guys. But if a tobacco lobbyist can write their own bill and then have it be passed without any of us knowing what's going on, that's insane. Our parents' let things like that happen. I don't think we get to be that neutral anymore. Now, up top, I have something from Occupy Wall Street, which I think was one of the more interesting things to come post the Arab Spring. I think that it was a chance for Americans to finally say and become polarized by the idea of transparency. Because some of us were like, I cannot believe that these people are doing what they're doing. So we are going to make sure our voices are heard. But then, the structure with which we tried to follow through did not really work out very well, because as a generation, we tend to want to be decentralized when it comes to our institutions. But when it comes to a movement that we're trying to make sure that the previous generation understands, we need to speak their language on some level. So Occupy opened our eyes, but also showed us that we needed more work. We need to figure out a better way to challenge these things. Now, the second thing is also an Occupy thing. Third thing is something that's been really polarizing: Black Lives Matter. Everyone seems to have a very strong opinion one way or the other, and those who are neutral are just really staunch in their neutrality. But either way, everyone has a very strong opinion about that. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up Black Lives Matter isn't simply because I'm a black man in America, or that I have a black son in America, or that I know other black people in America. Well, I also know a lot of other Americans, and I think that this is something that's not supposed to polarize us. It's supposed to bring us to a point where we can actually share our experiences with each other and be able to empathize on a very true and real level and have a conversation about the changes that need to happen in order for all of us to feel like we're experiencing the fullness of humanity in this country. Now, Black Lives Matter is something that started on Twitter, I believe 2012. But it just now started picking up steam because of things like social media. And it's a direct response to our ability to connect with each other. You can't hide from the information anymore. Neutrality is difficult to achieve. I often say nowadays, if you want to be ignorant, you can, but you got to try really, really hard. So this leads us to our gatekeepers. You've heard me speak about imperialism. You've heard me speak about connectivity. You've heard me talk about the access to information. This is really the biggest, great Trump-like wall that we need to work through as a generation. So many things that we consider to be day-to-day regular activities are decided by groups of hundreds of people dressed and look like that around the world. And as a generation, I'm gonna speak for myself, I'm not mad at anyone who is in this state, rich white people. I'm not mad at anyone who is in a position of power. What matters to me is that us on a street level are able to communicate with each other and be able to understand that we have our own individual power to affect change. We don't need them to tell us what we can learn and where we can learn it from. We don't need them to tell us who we can grant simple human inalienable rights to. We don't need them to tell us what sort of culture that we want to become. We make those decisions by all the choices that we make on a daily basis. We make those decisions by choosing to have conversations that are important and really uncomfortable on a regular basis. We make those decisions by what we like, haha, or sad face on Facebook. You know what I mean? It's like those things are very simple modes of communication, but they speak a lot when you aggregate it all. So my thing is, I'm tired of the gatekeepers. I'm looking forward to a time in which we discover that this world was ours to begin with. We did not need permission to be able to advocate for it, to build within it, to respect it, to love it, to find each other in it, and to build a future that matters the most to us. So, in almost closing, I consider this to be the generation that breaks things. We are changing industries. We are choosing not to be like our parents' parents. We are choosing to ask the question, why you gotta do it like this? Does it have to be this way? Do I have to wait for you in order for me to progress? Do I have to be an apprentice for 5 years before I can become a professional? Do I have to wait till I'm 35 to be a president if I can run a company at 22? And all of those questions and our approach and our intense need, there's like a wave. I'm not sure if all of you guys feel it, but I feel it very intensely. There is this wave of, we just want to open up all the possibilities to everyone. And that is what I call the breaking. It's the breaking of the mold of a generation that wanted to continue its influence hundreds of years after its passing. We as a generation don't care about who names a street after us. We don't necessarily want to have a building named after us. We don't want to have statues in libraries with our faces on it. All we care about is we want to build a thing, give it to the people, maybe make some money, do some dope shit, excuse me, and move on. And in closing, Jeremy kind of made me put this in here. I usually say this, and I always put my own quotes in quotations. I don't know why. I've been told that it's weird. But for some reason, I just always assume, like, adds more gravitas to the situation. Like on Facebook, I'll quote myself like Abe Lincoln said that, right? But this is something I truly feel and live for. Ours is a generation hoping to be the first breath of fresh air to a generation that we will never meet. I think that encapsulates the approach to this new generation of transparency. We don't want to be here forever. We want to create something that allows others to be here forever. Thank you. How'd I do? Boom. All right. Yes.
One of the trends that comes about with the greater access to information, it brings us a lot of benefits, but one of the other disturbing trends that we're starting to see is how, with search engines in particular and also in social media, it's easier to spread disinformation, false information, racist ideas
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. And we haven't quite figured out how to manage all of that.
Sure.
Do you have any thoughts on how that can be countered without disrupting this openness that we've gotten from technology?
Well, to be honest, there really isn't a realistic way to disrupt this openness. It's just going to keep on happening. The floodgates are open, and some of us are drowning in it, and some of us are surfing on it, right? So I do understand what you're saying, that there's, as much as there is true information out there, there's a lot of false information. It's easy to generate a propaganda machine via Twitter. But the reality of the situation is this: as a generation, we may not be able to stem that flow. We may not be able to solve that problem, but I don't think it's our job necessarily. Our job is just to continue to question, to continue to choose the choice, to make other choices than our parents did, and that's about it. I don't think we know how to necessarily stop people from sharing their ideas. That just sounds very Orwellian, even if they're wrong ideas. Did I answer your question? Sort of?
Sort of.
Gosh, darn it.
Sorry.
What up?
Well, I'm going to kind of turn that into the question I had originally, which is, what do you do when that information turns into action that makes you so angry? Yesterday, the Bundys got off.
That's real.
Protesters were arrested.
That's real.
And it's like, I'm so angry right now, and it's because the people in Oregon are like, oh, those people are heroes. And,
Well, if they were black, they wouldn't be heroes.
Right.
Right? I often have this conversation about how do you not become angry when you find out all of the injustices that surround you. There's no answer to that. It's all about self-work, because while you're consuming information, you're also distilling it into a way that's more manageable for yourself, right? I don't often get angry in conversation. Funny enough, like I'm having a conversation with a 71-year-old white dude, ex-Vietnam vet, and or Vietnam vet, at my son's bus stop, right? We're on day two of having an hour-and-a-half long conversation on the sidewalk. First day was weird because other parents were walking by us with their kids, just like pretending not to listen. Then the next day they're all just moving real slow, and then now we have like an audience, right? Like this is gonna become a YouTube series at some point, right? And and he was like, well, Trump's a revolutionary, and I was like, in some regards, I agree with you. And he was like, well, here's what people need to understand. And he started breaking down all these things that I felt like were archaic and weren't really open to my generation to have access to, or more importantly, open to my generation of people of color to have access to. He said something that just like, it could have easily driven me off the wall, right? He was like, so, I just wish that these poor black children would understand that there's a different way to do it. Like, I just want to get them all and show them how to live. I was like, pause. What are you talking about? Are you just assuming that every black child in America has no parent? Are you assuming that the only way that you want to see the world is the best way? Because that's a continuation of the ideology of imperialism. Now I'm thinking this, in my head, I'm hearing sounds of like plates breaking, right? and I was like, but what came out of my mouth is this. I was like, I get what you're trying to do, and I get what you're saying, but what you're misunderstanding is that your point of view is not the most important point of view when it's in regards to people who are disenfranchised, because you've never felt that and you don't really understand it. So what you should do is ask us, I don't understand what's going on, please educate me. And if you can't educate me, point me in the direction where I can become more educated. And he was like, all right, you win that one room. I was like, thanks, John. And his main theme that he kept carrying through, he's like, I just wish we can reach a consensus in America. That's what's wrong with us. We can't reach a consensus because every time we have these conversations, people get angry and then they just can't express themselves anymore. I'm about to cut him off, right? And I was like, calm down. Let that live, let it happen, So he's speaking to me and I'm getting keyed up. You can tell this is sort of like my level all the time, right? But you can definitely tell when I'm like really interested in something. Like I'm gonna lean in and be like, all right, tell me that one more time. Give me that bullshit one more time. And you know, and I was like, well, the problem with reaching a consensus is that, like, you know, we're still living in a country in which other humans still need to be given a right to be humans. You've never woken up in your life wondering if that was a possibility. You've never woken up in your life feeling like you walk into a room and you don't belong there. You've never felt the intensity of the disenfranchisement that people are talking about. It's not just black and brown people. It's not just Asian people. It's also women. It's members of the LGBTQ community. It's poor white Americans as well. Those Trump supporters we love to talk smack about, they are experiencing their civil rights movement now through Donald Trump. Think about that. They've been sent to the hollers of understanding and not allowed to express whatever they want to express. We do live in a country in which even if you're dead wrong, you can still say some shit. But we've not allowed their voice to be part of the entirety of the American experience. And now they're getting a chance to do so, and they're coming out in numbers we did not see coming. Insane numbers. Not to mention, this is like a heavily lawless part of the country, and they've been stockpiling guns for generations upon generations. So now the rest of us in the city is like, hold up, where are these dudes coming from? What's happening here? But like, had we given everyone an opportunity, an equal opportunity to voice their opinion in the American experience, we would not be as surprised or as angry or as confused as to what we should do as a country. Did I answer all the things? Because I see you texting. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, I'm taking notes.
Well, hot damn. All right. Dope. Sorry, go ahead.
I feel like as a society, and I'm going to focus on the U.S., we've made a lot of steps forward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, gay marriage is passed, but then I also feel like we're moving backwards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get political, but
You should.
okay. Trump, I find it so distressing that
Mm-hmm.
there's all these people who have these views of, you know, things I totally disagree with.
Yeah.
But I just find it distressing that we're taking steps forward, but then I feel like we're taking a giant step back in some ways.
I agree with you.
I don't know where we can find a way to peacefully move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
I don't know.
To answer your question, I don't know if we collectively took a step forward those generations ago. I know that the majority tried to, and there are parts of the majority that still had those feelings and those thoughts and that behavior that they transferred to the next generation around a Thanksgiving table. But the feelings were still there. We thought we were building an America that was more open, more supportive, like a lot more fair. But were it not for Instagram and Facebook Live, the whole nation would not know that thousands of black people have been dying since America. And they would not know about the prison industrial complex. They would not know that Walmart is getting their shoes made in private prisons. They would not understand the depth of depravity that our political system has mired itself in. So I understand your distress, but you should feel it and own it. But then use that to have conversations that are really uncomfortable. I've got friends who have like family members that just post crazy things on Facebook, you know, and they'll send me screenshots. I feel like that's what I do for a living at this point, just like responding to people's things, right? You know, and they're like, you believe this? Like, I hear you. So what should I do? I'm like, I don't know. Like you should have a conversation about it, and then people get really, really tired. Fatigue is a real thing for this generation, mental and emotional and informational fatigue. That's a new thing. And you got to care for yourself, but also always feel free to make one comment on that thread and walk away, right? Or reach out to the person personally and have a real conversation on Messenger, whatever it is. Wherever you see this person, pull them off to the side, be like, tell me how you really feel. Because at the end of the day, that's all people want, especially those who feel like they've not been heard. They just want someone to say, please, tell me how you feel. Jeremy?
So you referenced this
struggle that we have with the new access to information and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
I just the other day was listening to, I think it was a Freakonomics radio segment, but it was called In Defense of Incrementalism. And it was addressing society's need to like get from where they are now to the perfect solution immediately, and not understanding that it takes 300 little steps in the meantime.
That's for
So
sure.
Kind of how that factors into your conversation here and your thoughts on it.
It's funny, like old guy John, he and I were having this conversation. He's like, all right, you had to beat me in 3 steps. You got 1 and 2. We're gonna go to chapter 3 on Monday. I was like, all right, what is that? He's like, well, I need to not feel anxiety about what we're leaving for our children's children, like, because we need to be responsible for their development 100 years down the line. I was like, we don't have to wait till Monday. I'll tell you straight up, it's not your job. It's not we don't get to have this ego that is so huge and far reaching that we get to make decisions for people 150 years from now. The point of today is to consume information, become aware, connect with others, make good, conscionable decisions, be responsible with the way you treat the planet, be responsible with the way you treat each other, and more importantly, just don't be a dick. You know what I'm saying? So it's not our job to think about what's happening 100 years from now. Our founding fathers were trying to plot out history in a time pre-telephone, pre-fax, pre-telegraph, pre-everything. And here we are at a generation where we can pull out a device from our pocket and find out anything that we want to find out. It's right here. We can control the lights in this room. We can control, it's different. So they could not have pictured the time that we're living in. So which means the foundation they built for us to now continue, that's got to be shifted or broken down, or actually just broken. We gotta do something different. And we're hoping that 100 years from now, these kids will come into a world in which we did not set the rules for them. They get to see the pieces and the things that we've built, and they get to create the society that feels the most genuine to them. And I think that's the greatest gift. Yeah.
Okay, we're all humans, right? And I totally
Real talk.
appreciate what you're saying about the empathy piece. Like, I feel like that's really hitting home. So, knowing that each human has a special set of gifts that they've been given, we in this room are all creatives, right? This is like our special set of gifts. Do you believe that there is a role or responsibility that those that lean more towards creativity, that have those gifts, do you think there's a certain responsibility beyond just empathy?
Yes.
That goes back to this transparency.
Yes. Empathy is one part of the action. The second part is what skills can you bring to bear to create the change that you feel should happen around you. All of us who are creatives, if we're not trying our best to do pro bono work at least once a year, or find a passion project that we can dedicate our energy and time to, then we're just sort of paying lip service to empathy, right? It's important that we engage with the skills that we have. If you're great at copy, you can help BLM with their marketing because they need it. If you are great at design work, there are like 100 nonprofits who are using design work from Martha, from like clip art, right? You can walk in there and be like, let's help you fix this, and that's like 20 to 40 hours of your time that you can spread out over a month, and you've given them something that'll allow them to move forward in a positive way. Find the thing that you care about and pour yourself into it. If you can't find a thing that you care about, just do a bunch of stuff until the one thing shows up, or the 2 things, or the 15 things.
So, like you were talking about earlier, I have noticed a clash of generations.
That's real talk. That is real talk.
It seems like there's a lot of negative connotations with being associated with my generation.
It's because they're angry.
It's like, technically I'm a millennial, but I'm not a millennial. And so
Wait, what does that mean?
Because, it's like all millennials can't commit to anything, they're not serious. I've noticed that a lot, especially through social media. So how can we as a generation come together in order to make these social changes happen, and as you said during your presentation, break things?
Yeah. How can you do that?
As a generation.
Well, I think we are doing that. The choices we're making to to, instead of paying for when we travel, how we travel, who we travel with, where we stay when we travel, all of those choices are a part of breaking the process. Uber wouldn't be Uber if we didn't choose to use it. You know what I mean? You know, so that's one step. The second step is like, there are a lot of people of the millennial generation who are involved in activism, who are involved in something that affects their community or the global community at large. It's easy to find that. Just type that in Facebook and then go sort out what feels the best to you. Now, to answer your initial question, the reason why the older generation is often beating down on millennials is because they truly don't understand where we're coming from. They can't see and distill information the way that we do. They don't feel what we're feeling. So it's sort of like a parent telling their kid, like, you don't know what love is, you're just 15 years old, it's not real. And at 15, you're like, but this is like the most important thing that's ever happened in my life, you know? And it's real for you. And they discount that, and that is unfair. You should not allow that to be a part of the way you approach things. It's okay if someone doubts you. It's okay if someone is denigrating generation. That's what old people are supposed to do. Now, as the younger generation, I think we're gonna grow into individuals that will remember this experience and not continue it. Yeah.
It's going to sound weird, but in your conversations with John, you sound like a hospice worker to me.
Oh.
Something that needs to die, someone, you know.
Yeah.
It's gentle and it's respectful.
Yeah.
And it's peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to offer up your example as kind of a question answer to Emily's question of how we can comport ourselves.
In that way?
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful.
Oh, thank you. You know, it's hard to, that's a really good question. That's going to be a tough one. I always approach things from another person's perspective, and then I distill it from my own perspective, and then I give them that experience, right? So it's a question of like, I can walk into a conversation or an argument and be strong in my point of view. But as I'm speaking, I'm watching their reaction and I'm feeling what they're feeling and I'm letting them say whatever it is they need to say to me. And then we continue the conversation. You just keep building on top of each other. As far as like, you know, the best way to comport yourself is like, not everyone can get away with not being enraged by what's happening. Feel what you're feeling, allow it to happen. But when that rage blinds you from allowing the next person to truly express their point of view, then you're not really creating a complete exchange. And that's the whole point of all of this. If we can't talk, if we can't understand one another, then how can we chart the course to a better future? Which is what I think all of us want while we're alive. And it's just time, and we have the capabilities to do so. So let's just push forward. And I've also have this thing where it's like, it's my understanding that as a generation, anyone 65 and older who's still alive, they have had the chance to mold a world that we're born into, and they failed in so many ways. So anytime that any person who's really old says to me, "You young folks don't understand anything," and I was like, well, and I'll be like, well, that's fine. I want you to explain to me how global warming is so intense. I want you to explain to me why the wage gap is a problem. I want you to explain to me why you think women are second citizens. And by the way, what's up with all these black people being exploited all over the globe? Well, that's not my job. Well, then you need to sit down. Because if you're not trying to take in all the things that are happening, if you are not open to understanding someone other than yourself, then your part of the conversation becomes a little bit less potent. Grace?
Yeah, I was wondering, when you were talking about the internet before, talking about decentralization of information and peer-to-peer stuff, what do you think, though, about so many of our conversations happening through these big companies that are only getting bigger, the Facebooks and Googles and Amazons of the world? That's kind of the opposite of decentralization.
Real talk.
So.
Well, that's that's a good question. My thoughts on that is, you know, the man created a good product, and he's optimizing it and maximizing it to its best potential. We can't be responsible for what big corporations do with our information, because we gave it to them wholesale as early as 1996. So there's going to be a next phase of this process. Currently, it's all about the new entrepreneurs, the new access to information, open sourcing of everything. There's going to come a point where we as a generation decide to stop using any services that are taking advantage of what we're offering them. So I think, one, it's great that we're able to have conversations on Facebook and Twitter, and I don't know if Snapchat counts, but that's the only way that we can communicate with each other. That's the easiest way to access another human being, is through social media. So we cannot not use it, right? But at the end of the day, we can't control what a person does with the information we've given them. But as a generation, we hope to be able to come around to that when the time comes, even though these things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and almost looking very much like the things that I have a problem with currently. But damn, man, Facebook is just too easy. But something else is going to come along after that that's going to allow us to feel more comfortable with the content that we're sharing and the way we're sharing it. Facebook is not the end of the process.
I apologize for not reading your bio more carefully.
It's cool.
But what do you do for a living?
Oh, I run a creative services company. We design stuff.
Because you ought to be talking to people. I mean, your voice is perfect, and it's calm and one-on-one.
Thank you.
You could change the world.
Oh, snap. All right.
I mean, truly, you don't, often one of the problems with all the social media, I think, is that you don't get the relationship building, and you just made us all become your best friends.
Thank you. There's no answer for that. But to speak to the connectivity of Facebook, we all assume that we're not connecting one-on-one on Facebook. We all assume that there always has to be like a deeper connection in order for us to share ideas holistically. But that's not true. It turns out, I have so many experiences on Facebook where I'll post something and then I'll watch like 200 people engage on it on the comments, right? In reading those comments, that's teaching me a lot about those people. That's also letting me understand how they process things. And then I can reach out to them individually and be like, yo, how do you feel about this? I've got a dude who's a staunch racist who's a friend of mine on Facebook. Every time I post something, he's like, well, black people are crazy. I'm like, damn, Sean, this is not the platform, man. And then I'll reach out to him via messaging, and I'm like, all right, I get that you're feeling very strong about it. He's like, well, you just don't understand what white people are going through, man. I'm like, all right, bro, let's go. So like those things are real, and I, for one, I feel like, you can actually have real authentic experiences via social media. It's just the intention with which you engage. That's what matters. You got to go the extra step for yourself to internalize the information, because our news feeds are going 24/7. So what you're seeing and imbibing, that's a part of the process. You got to distill that actively. It can't just be a thing that's just like flowing by you. It can't be all like, sonogram pictures and like, wedding shots. I'm not sure how many people are 20 or 23 or 24 around here, but I'm sure you see a lot of that nowadays, right? So that's a part of the process for sure. You have to be intentional and active about the way that you consume, distill, and share information. Everywhere you go, it doesn't matter if it's a bus stop, doesn't matter if you're a Kroger and someone is trying to take the last mango, be like, yo, pause, bro. And then you meet up and you talk about things, It's like everyone has a perspective, and what's beautiful about this time is like everyone has something that they want to talk about. And that is such a gift, because you can learn so much about the human condition simply by engaging people in everyday conversation. It's not always safe to do so. There's some sketchy folks out there, but it's a process.
To that point, what do you see as the role of a curator in this day and age?
Curator, in what sense?
So
like news?
Many information, whether it's news, whether it's art, whether it's what, I mean, the obvious analogy is a person who runs a gallery. They choose what exhibits to put on. But curation is also a term that comes up a lot when you're doing, like you're managing a blog, for example. You reach out to a particular audience by selecting or writing articles that are meaningful to that audience. And this is one way that people cut through information overload.
Sure, I think it's good. I think it's also problematic because what it allows us to do is to continue to be a little bit more passive about the way we engage information. And it's important that we push through the curators to the truth of the matter and evolve our own philosophies, ideologies. So curators have a place in that they help us distill information, but the problem is it's hard to distill information without bias. So I'd rather not live my life or build my ideologies based on someone else's bias. We've tried that for the past 2,000 years. I think it's time to do it different. There's someone in the back?
So we've been talking about these generational shifts.
Yeah.
In the time of this election, it sort of begs the question, how, like, the presidency roots back to what a time when we were like writing with feathers. So as far as being part of a generation that's breaking things, like, and not to be super contrarian, but have you ever thought about like what a potentially better solution would be? And I know that.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think this election, if anything, has made it pretty obvious that the two-party system is not going to last much longer in America, which I'm thankful for and also terrified about. So as a generation, I would have loved an opportunity to be able to pick between Bernie, Hillary, Donald Trump, Jill Stein, and 4 other people even. I want options. That's what we all want. You know, the fact that we're allowing superdelegates who don't care about our wishes to decide who we get to send to be nominated for president is insane. I don't like it. And I think as a generation, we're not feeling it either. The fact that, you know, we are breaking down those walls by how intensely we supported this person like Bernie Sanders and how intensely we do not like the fact that our 2 choices are basically like the choice between the unburnt side of the pancake and the regular side of the pancake. And that's not okay, man. You know? And I think as a generation, that's like really, really frustrating. And I don't want to do it like this anymore. So I do feel strongly that within the next 10 years, we're going to see a shift towards decentralizing the election process and figuring out a better way for people to be able to have a say in their own governance. Because the gatekeepers can't hold the keys forever. At some point, they're gonna go bye-bye, and that's okay, because that's what we're supposed to do as humans, right? We're not here to live forever. We're here to be alive, do a good thing, and then move on. Any other questions?
So going back to the social media aspect, for those of us who are content creators who are maybe brands on social media, do you think there's a unique role there, or should brands be taking a step back?
I think brands inevitably have to behave like a person, right? The brand voice has to sort of negotiate itself like a personality. So it's up to the social media person to sort out what voice the brand needs to support and what voice it shouldn't. Like, you know, we manage social media for people, and occasionally I'll be like, well, we should probably comment on this with so-and-so. And then I'll send an email and the owner of the business is like, I don't know about that, man. That just seems a little bit too polarizing, right? But I do see a shift towards brands trying to make a real strong social stand. I'm not sure if it's always authentic, but at least it's moving in that direction. So yes, the responsibility is to recognize what's happening around you and be able to incorporate your ideologies and your opinions into the great conversation. Last couple more questions, or are we good? Damn, I've answered everything? Well, all right. Thank you so much.